Everyone, thanks for joining us today. I am super excited to be doing this. I recently talked about how I was going to start transitioning into DFIR, but with so much information out there and so many tools, it is just so overwhelming. So I invited one of my friends here today to kind of walk us through their journey and give us some advice on what they're doing now, what tools they started out with. And I mean, I guess, why am I going to do spoilers? So I have this big thing if I never talk to about people or for people. So, friend, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a bit about you?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. My name is Ursula or Ushi Cowan. I go by Ushi on the Twitters. That is my, it's actually my nickname from childhood, and that's why I go by that. So yeah, my name is Ushi. And so I have kind of a weird, convoluted path to where I am now, but I started out in law enforcement. I was a detective. And then as I went through some different cases that got me into doing some online crimes, and specifically I worked in special victims. So I did a lot of cases that involved children, exploitation of children. And when I started working some exploitation cases, I started learning about a task force that we had down in Florida called well, it's not just in Florida, but the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And so I was like, what is this? I want to be a part of it. And I started to kind of push my agency. I had a wonderful boss at the time who was super into it. And so we kind of pushed to become an affiliate member of that task force. And then once I got in there, they started teaching us about it's like the very basics of like digital forensics and incident response. And so I just got my, what's the term, like wet your whistle, like I just started to kind of learn about it. And I was like, oh my God, I love this. Like, it was like, I was immediately passionate about it. I loved the tech portion of it, as well as being able to help, like, true victims of crimes. And I started getting more into forensics. I was able to start kind of working with the agency's forensic examiner that we had. I worked for like kind of a smallish agency. We only had one forensic examiner. And he was actually getting ready to go out on paternity leave. And so he taught me kind of like a down and dirty mobile forensic. And so so I've been out of law enforcement now for about 3 years. No, almost 4 years. And when I left, so I don't know if it's still the same way, but when I left, it probably is. It was primarily mobile forensics is what we were seeing the most of, right? Because with the exception of like our hacker community, not a lot of people are doing a ton of their activity on a laptop, on a desktop, on an actual computer. Most of people are using, their mobile devices for everything. And so, evidence of crimes a lot of times are in there, especially with exploitation of children. A lot of that happens through like different apps and whatnot. So mobile forensics was something that I was super interested in because I felt like that was, for law enforcement, at least, that was like a really big area that we needed to have competent people doing. And so I started doing the mobile forensics. And then when he left our agency, he was working with the Secret Service's Electronics Crimes Task Force. That always trips me up. I said it. Or ECTF. And so he was with the ECTF task force. And when he left, I was like, can I join? And, there's a little bit of paperwork and red tape involved because it is the government, but yeah, I ended up joining, the Electronics Crimes Task Force, for Central Florida. And they sent me to a bunch of different forensics schools. So I had talked to one of the instructors that I ended up becoming good friends with. And he had let me know that where I lived, I actually could, because of my training with the Secret Service, I could actually apply for the master's program in DFIR. It was right in the middle of the pandemic is actually when I graduated. So I graduated in 2020 with my master's degree in digital forensics and incident response. And so it really did help. By that point, I actually had moved on to a career change, and I started working as a SOC analyst. And the first week that I was there, I think I was high on like anxiety and adrenaline, because like I remember just like my heart just seemed like it was always beating a million miles an hour, because I was scared to death. I was scared to death I was going to fail. And so what I did was everything, I didn't know what TCP/IP was. And I was in the SOC. Every night I would go home and I would blow up YouTube, Cybrary, Pluralsight. The company that I worked for had a Pluralsight subscription, and when I think it was about 2 weeks in, they gave me an account, and about a month later, I had my first like one-on-one meeting with my boss, and he laughed and he said, in the month that you've been here, he said, you have surpassed everybody's yearly Pluralsight. I didn't realize that they could see what we were viewing and how much hours we had spent. And he was like, I had like, I don't know, it was like 80 hours, 100 hours, something like that. And the next closest was somebody who had like 4. But like, I was like, come hell or high water, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to understand what PCAPs are and how to look through them. And because I was looking at PCAPs and I was like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm looking at. And so I would go home and I would look for every resource that I could to learn all the things that I could learn. And so I eventually, a couple of years later, I started to kind of look around at like, what's my next step going to be, and decided to apply for my position that I'm in currently at Mandiant. Again, it was one of those things where I was like, I think I got like 80% of the qualifications. But there was a lot of knowledge gaps when I started here as well. And same thing, I was YouTube, Cybrary. We have some paid subscriptions that the company pays for that I use occasionally, but really honestly, I love Cybrary. I have zero affiliation with anybody at Cybrary, but I push them a lot because I like the fact that their platform on the video side is free. So like if you want to go through an entire course on pen testing, it's very well laid out. It's very organized, and a logical progression through that. So like, and it's like 40 hours and you've got all this knowledge that you need to be able to do different things in security. So like, I'm always telling people about them. If you can find, like, YouTube is just so big and so vast that sometimes it's hard to find, but there are a lot, if you know of creators, that's a great place for people to go and look for training, because like a lot of those people, a lot of the creators that create content will have playlists that kind of take you through, whatever it is that you're trying to learn. And so there's so many great free resources out there that I didn't realize, because in law enforcement, something that's really interesting is like in law enforcement, everybody uses paid tools. For the most part, there's a couple of free tools out there, but like most of them are paid tools. And people think of it like, oh, well, if they're a free tool, then they must be subpar. And it's just not true. There's so many good free things out there that you can use to learn. And honestly, even doing forensics in and of itself. And I'm still on a couple of like listservs, and I'll see people asking questions about like, hey, I'm trying to get this, and like whatever paid tool that they're using isn't able to extract something that they're trying to get. And so I'll see people say, have you tried Autopsy, which is a forensic suite of tools that is totally free. And I think I've seen a lot more people on Twitter in the security space mention like free tools like that, and they use them. But like in law enforcement, people are like, why would I use that? Like, that's just some like free tool. And they act like it's subpar, when really the truth is that there's a lot of really good free tools out there that you can use to learn and or do your job. And you don't have to spend any money on it whatsoever.
right now in your current position, what is your current, I guess, official position?
Thank you. So I work for Mandiant, their security validation platform. And basically, I have to kind of explain it a little bit so you understand what I do.
Yeah.
What it does is customers use our platform in order to test their security controls. So we create content. I work for the team that creates content that demonstrates different malicious behaviors, TTPs, malware, whatever. And what we do is, my role is called a threat research analyst. A lot of people think that I do threat research, and that's not correct. What I do is I analyze threat research done by others. So like both open sourced as well as internal. And honestly, a lot of open source because, the people in our community are amazing and they put out really good content. And sometimes I find wonderful things internally, but sometimes I need somebody to explain it to me in a slightly different way. And so I'll go and find other research that people have done and that basically either it's malware research or talking about different TTPs that threat actors are using. And we break those down into their basic behaviors. So like, with a malware program that might have 1,000 different behaviors. And so we'll try and break those down into little chunks so that you can test, so that people are able to test their security controls with the small pieces in hopes that if the malware author alters something else in the program, but they keep this one behavior, that's still going to trigger an alert or, whatever it is they're looking for. So what I do every day is depending on what's hot right now, if a new CVE comes out or we get a new, POC on some technique that, we heard about, then I will, we grab that, my team, we grab those and we start understanding everything that's going on. And then we break it down and we recreate it we call them actions. And they're just like, each action is like a behavior. And so we create those and so that people can then use them on their systems. So every day I get to just kind of break down malware and then I recreate it in like my own VMs. And so that I make sure that I can recreate whatever the malware is doing, which a lot of times is way more difficult than we realize because there's days that I'm like, it's malware. Like, why is it so difficult for me to get it to run in my environment? But yeah, so that's what I do.
On that,
is that clear?
No, it is, but there's just so much to it, right? And from the outside, starting out, looking at that, I'm going like, mind blown, like, right? Like, how do you do all that? And I'm sure that, yes, a lot of base knowledge, a lot of just experience goes into it, but tooling has to be a big part of it, right? Like you're still using base tools just to even get your first step. So can you kind of walk me through like, all right, you find out a new CVE, you find out a new piece of malware, now your team.
Sure. So a lot of the tools, honestly, that I use, so we have different types of content that we create. We have some network actions, we have endpoint actions. And so like a lot of the tools that I utilize are just tools that are inside of our computer. Like some of them are just native because for our purposes, we want to make sure that it's going to work across a bunch of different environments. So, we don't go super crazy into using different tools. It's mostly just native stuff. However, I do use some tools to like analyze things. Wireshark, when I first started using it, I love Wireshark. I would love to meet the people who created Wireshark and who keep it up to date because I think it's such an amazing product. And the fact that like it's free blows my mind because I don't know anybody that looks at PCAPs any other way other than in Wireshark. And so for anybody who is unaware, right? So when we have network traffic that's going back and forth, anything on the internet, even like our streaming, right? Like that creates traffic on your network. And if there is some type of appliance in place, or you can use Wireshark actually to catch network traffic, which a lot of people do. There might be some kind of appliance in place. in a larger network to capture that network traffic. And usually the purpose of that is, later on, if we need to either, like, sysadmins use it a lot for trying to troubleshoot like something that's gone wrong, right? And then security people will use that to try and figure out, number one, is there something malicious? Number two, what's malicious? Three, where did it come from? I worked at in a SOC for a company that had, I think when I left, we had something like 30,000 endpoints. And so, we had to rely a lot on just our alerts. And then when we had things that would pop up and say, hey, something's suspicious, then we needed to go and look and see if we could find that, right? And so network traffic, no matter what you do, whether you're doing red teaming, blue teaming, purple, network traffic is in everything in security. And so understanding that, I think, is like the first thing to do, is to understand, like you said, like the basic knowledge. And then I think Wireshark is such a great tool to start with, because being able to kind of figure out, because it's so robust, but you can also throw a PCAP in it and at least start scrolling through, even if you don't know how to filter things, even if you don't really know what you're looking for, you can kind of poke around and you can kind of figure things out without too much training and knowledge. But then, like, I suggest people really learn how Wireshark works for their purposes, learn about filters, learn about like changing, because you can change the settings so that, like, when I use Wireshark compared to like how it comes out of the box, I have it set up completely differently. I don't like to have, like, when Wireshark comes up, it's just got like numbers for each line of traffic. I would rather see dates and times, so you can change those things around. So I think one of the tools, and I use Wireshark every single day. But anyways, yeah. So what other tools? I think, so for malware analysis, which I think is great for like forensics, understanding forensics is really understanding what the programs are doing to your computer and where they're hiding their files. And because if you're just like, almost never are you going into a computer or a network or, something like that, where you're just like, I don't know what I'm looking for. Let's look for bad things. No, usually we have something. Even with threat hunting, you're looking at intel and going, oh, okay, this is bad. Let's see if it's in our network. So you're looking for something specific. With malware analysis, that's not always the case, right? With malware analysis, that's at a deeper level, you're trying to really understand what that program is doing and how it's doing it. And I am not a software engineer. I barely know how to do any code. That's on the top of my list of things to learn right now. In fact, we were just talking about it last night. I'm doing 100 days of code coming up. But so I say that because I can do malware analysis without having to go through like a debugger or, like a reverse engineering tool. There are plenty of free tools and there are plenty of like inexpensive books that you can get to help you go through those. What I use is, and I don't use it because it came from Mandiant, but we have a team called the Flare team, and I can never remember what Flare stands for. It's like, I think because, we just separated from FIRE. I think it's FireEye Labs Advanced Reverse Engineering or something. But they're kind of the dream team of people who, they do a lot of different things, but one of the things that they do is malware analysis and reverse engineering and figuring out all the things. Well, the Flare team, what they did was, really it was for internal, but then they released it to the public for free, which is their Flare VM. And so what they did was, as they had, new analysts and new, malware researchers, malware analysts coming through the team, they would ask everybody, what tools do you like to use? And the cool thing is, most of them are free, if not all of them. And so they put together basically a VM. They put together an image that you can download and you can use on whatever, virtualization software that you're using. Currently, I use VMware because that's what I'm given. But like when I do anything personally on my personal laptop, I use VirtualBox because it's free. And honestly, VirtualBox is very easy and user-friendly to use. So I use VirtualBox for the majority of my virtualization outside of work. And that VM will work on that as well. And so it's just packed with like all the tools, and they even have like if you do the practical malware analysis book, they actually have all of the PMA labs in a folder in there so that like you can go in and just kind of work through that. And I think pretty much at this point, like practical malware analysis is like everywhere on the internet. You can download it for a couple of bucks to get a PDF version of it. You can, buy it for probably $20. And work through those labs, or you don't even have to. I mean, you can just work through the labs. There's so many different free trainings online. I can never remember the one guy's name who I absolutely love. I keep him in my he always has a tab open because I love his stuff. And like, that's where I go to learn the things that I need to learn. It's Sam Bowne, Bowne. Bowne. I thought it was Brown. Shows what I know. Anyways, I think his website it's samsclass.info, and he has a bunch of different types of classes that are completely free. He is an instructor for a community college. And so his stuff is in that kind of that regimented organizational style that I prefer, but you don't have to pay for the class. He wants the information to be free to everybody. And so he has a class, it's called CNET 126, and it's practical malware analysis. And what it does is it uses that book, and he goes through and he's got all his videos on there, all of the labs. And I don't think he uses the Flare VM. He uses a different malware analysis VM, and which, you can use whatever you want to. I like Flare only because it comes preloaded with everything, and I'm lazy and I don't want to have to like curate all those tools myself. So I much prefer to somebody to give me a big box and go, here's a kit. And that's how I feel like the Flare VM is. It's like a malware analysis kit, and it has everything in there that you would probably want. And they constantly are like updating it, and, they'll revamp it if something else comes out. Like when like G-Hydra came out, they added that as a tool to the VM. So I never know where to go to find it. I just Google Flare VM if I need to set it up on a new computer, and you can, there's a link to like the GitHub, and you just pull it, and like it's super, super easy. Anybody can use it. It's kind of like, to me, it's kind of like the Kali Linux, but for malware analysis. I've never used any of the tools in Kali for malware analysis. I know that there's some tools in there as well. So like that would be, if Flare VM didn't exist, I probably would go to Kali next, just because, again, I like things given to me. And so if I don't have to curate and figure out what I want, like I figure these guys are like pros and they put all this together. So I go with that. But yeah, definitely, I think, and like there's so many videos out there for you to just follow along, and like start with just sitting down and going, okay, let's do this. And you can, make sure that you're being safe with your networking when you are using something that has live malware. And that's it. And it's not very difficult. And that's just, like one setting change. It's like 4 clicks, and you can turn off networking for that VM. And so that way, you're not like detonating malware on your network and, calling out to C2s. But like you can, I love, that is my favorite thing that I do, is when I get to play with malware. There are 2 things that make me very, very happy. Number 1 is typing in infected to unlock a malware zip. I love it. to this day, I type infected probably 10 times a day, and it gives me a little thrill every time I do it. Like, it's just in the back of my head, I go,
and for newbies, what's that all about?
Thank you. So, for the most part, when you download malware, which you can get in so many places, VirusTotal, you can download as well. I think for VirusTotal, you do have to have an account, but it's free. And so, they do have paid accounts too, I think, but anyways, you download it. Most malware, the default password is infected. So that way, you know that you're opening something that is dangerous and malicious and could do harm. So that's just kind of the default is infected, and it makes me smile every time I get to type that in, because it means I'm doing something fun. And when I was in the SOC, I always loved following malicious links and getting to do that part of the investigation. And and there's, we always did it in safe ways that masked us using Tor and that kind of thing. But and that's actually would be a great episode, just talking about kind of if you want to do those things, because lots of people want to investigate that negative stuff. And I got this phishing email and I want to see where it goes and I want to see what it does. And there are safe ways that you can do that. And so I think that, it's great. So I love typing infected into my computer. That makes me it gives me a little warm feeling. And then the second thing, I love playing with ransomware. I love locking up my VM. I like seeing what happens. I like watching, I like watching everything that goes on as malware does its thing. And for whatever reason, ransomware, I love it. I love locking. I love having it go, you can't get your stuff back, because I know that, yes, I can. And it's just a lot of fun to work with. And so if anybody's interested in doing malware analysis, don't think I don't have a computer science degree, or I don't know anything about code. I've learned a lot of what I've learned about code from malware. Understanding kind of the pointers and how the malware is okay, now you're going to do this, and now you're going to inject into this process. And that to me is fascinating.
I think one of the key facts that's really helped me I can have a solid ground, I can understand, is no matter what we end up doing, no matter what the malware does, it's all code, right? It's all going to share some base concept of, if it's code, it's written, which means I just have to figure out how to read this, not read the code as in hey, I know C, but read what it's doing.
Right.
And so obviously, as you're going through investigations, there are just some key points that are going to be your breadcrumbs, right? The key things that you're looking for. What do those tend to be? If I'm brand new and I'm okay, I'm overwhelmed, I've got this malware, what's my first step and what am I looking for? What am I trying to build out?
So I think when you're brand new and you want to figure out what's going on here, I think the best thing to start with is to find a malware researcher on Medium or somewhere that somebody is putting out their stuff. It can even be a larger company as well. There's pretty much everybody, the big names that we know, everybody has malware research out there that are putting out their stuff in blogs. Start by grabbing something that somebody else has already done, and either one of two things: either follow along with a YouTube video where you're pausing and doing the things and watch them use the tools that they're using, and walk yourself through it so that you're recognizing what the behavior is, right? And then from that point, and maybe kind of even in conjunction, there's a lot of malware analysis videos out. What I did was I just started watching them and using the tools that I had, or downloading the tools that they were using, because I'll tell you, probably 99% of the time, if you watch a YouTube video of somebody doing something, they're using tools that are free. I rarely see anything where they're oh, you need to pay for this tool in order to be able to do the elite things that I'm doing. Almost never. Usually the people who are putting out videos are putting it out there for you to, consume and understand that knowledge. So I think there's enough can't be said for just simply following along like it's a tutorial. Another thing might be to find kind of a walkthrough and just do that one thing at a time. I do that a lot with like HackTheBox, or other types of, like red teaming, pen testing type of activities. Whenever I want to learn something, I just will follow along, and I pause it and then I do it, because computers are weird and they don't always do the same thing, right? If the environment shifted slightly and you put in one command that worked for this guy, but it doesn't work for you, and then you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? So like, even just working through those issues so that you can get it to mirror what somebody else is doing. It may even be too that your environment, if you download a VM and you're using, Windows 10, it may be patched. And so what one malware was exploiting in a previous version of that operating system may no longer work now. So just kind of like going along and figuring those things out is one thing, right? Because like there's always going to have stuff that comes up that you're not going to understand. And if you're super, super new, you may not know if this is just like a gap in knowledge or if this is something that the malware is doing. I will get you a link because I can't remember what the name of it is, but there's a YouTube video that I still rewatch because I always get something new. One of the tools that I like using with malware analysis is like the Process Explorer and Process Hacker. And those are really cool tools because they have a GUI that will pop up and kind of like show you what's going on. Now, Process Explorer is like, there's a lot of data that comes through there. And the best thing that I've found is that if you delete your logs and then start it right before you start your malware, you're getting rid of like a bunch of noise that it doesn't mean anything, because you're going to get a ton of noise anyways on your computer just doing normal processes that it does that has nothing to do with the malware. It's just working, and it's constantly doing different updates or different processes just to keep it going. That has nothing to do with your malware. And so it's important though that you're able to start like differentiating, oh, that's normal versus what the malware is actually doing. And so I think the best way when you're brand new is to kind of ride on the shoulders of the giants that have come before us and just do it at this, if you have multiple monitors, throw up the video in one monitor, and then on your largest monitor, put your VM, put your like whatever it is you're working on, and go with that person and do it step by step by step, and doing that as much as you can, so that you really are you're really able to start recognizing what is the malware doing. And so that, because there's sometimes that I'll see something and I go, oh, I didn't know that it did that. And that's super cool, right? That's what we want. We want to be able to start figuring it out without the crutch. But unfortunately, we do need that crutch, I think, right at the very beginning.
So obviously not everybody comes in from a brand new path. So let's say like, I've been working in the SOC for a while. I'm getting comfortable with, incidents right now. I'm really getting my hands wet, my feet wet, whatever it is that you get wet. What are some things that when you were there, you wish, like, if you could go back and talk to you back then, like some tips you've been like, look, calm down. If you did this, if you use this, everything will be a lot easier.
Gosh, there's so many things. Yeah, I definitely think I would make such a better SOC analyst now. I think, oh my gosh, that's such a great question. What would I tell myself? Ask all your questions. Ask the dumb questions that you think are dumb, because they're not dumb. And I have a new coworker right now who is super thrilled to work with our team, and I love her energy, and I hope that she continues with that excitement. But she'll ask me questions. She'll say, "I have a stupid question," and it's not a stupid question, because when she asks me, I go, "Girl, I just learned that 6 months ago, so it's not a stupid question. The fact that you were able to ask it in week 2 is way better than when I didn't learn that for so long." So it's nothing in computers is a stupid question, because computers aren't simple. Like they can be, the usage of them can be very simple, but how they work underneath the hood and how malware is working and how threat actors are constantly changing their tactics and techniques, because right at the end of the day, they're criminals. And criminals are crafty and they will always find a way. And so when you patch up one hole, they're going to be like, all right, well, let's find the next hole, right? And so I think understanding that it's always changing, you're never going to know everything. As soon as you can get that into your mind, the happier and less stressed out that you're going to be. As far as like tools, I wish I had just honestly learned as much as I could about the basics, like I mentioned before, like Wireshark. Like I wish I had just focused on Wireshark I was trying to figure out all the tools, and I wish I had just taken a couple of the tools, a couple of the biggies. So I think like if you're working in a SOC and you're moving from maybe like a basic tier 1 into like a tier 2 level, which usually like tier 1 is like a triage tier. They go, tier 1 is usually like, is it malicious or not? And it's almost a scale of like, is it malicious? Is it like, it looks more malicious than not malicious, so we're going to pass it on to the next person. The SOC that I worked in was tier 1 and tier 2. And so it was kind of like, we had to go from, is it malicious? Is it not? Okay, yes, we're going to look into this a little bit more. And then we would move into that next phase. And I think when you're working places, sometimes you have access to so many tools that it becomes overwhelming. So I think if I were to do it again, I would go to one of the senior analysts, like on our incident response team. And I would say, like, what 3 tools do you think are the most important tools for me to learn in this position? And I would, I think I would spend my time focusing on those 3 tools, because I find even now I will, just like this conversation, I'll ADHD all over the place with tools, and I'll focus on this one tool for a little bit. And then I start getting an idea of it, but then like something else will pop up and I'm like, oh, well, now I got to focus over here. And like, there's so many topics that, you try to focus on that you end up not really gaining much from any of them. So I would say pick 3. I think 3 is a manageable amount that you can actually focus on, learn. And then as you feel super comfortable with those, then move on to another. But again, even with the tools, like Wireshark is so verbose that like there's no way that you're going to understand every single feature in any short amount of time. So unless maybe you take a Wireshark boot camp, which I would love to take, but so I would say pick a couple and focus on those before worrying about the others, and utilize the senior people that are open to your questions. I think that's huge. I think networking and making friends and making allies in wherever you're working is important, because there's going to be things that are specific to your environment that Twitter can't help with, right?
Elvis, like answers are where you didn't even know you had questions. Like I said earlier, I was like, mine's always, it's just code. I have to figure it out. And I'm like, no, okay, it's just code. And I have to figure out whether it's malicious or not. All right, I got the next level. Thank you.
Great.
This has been awesome. There's just so much to learn. And so I think that's what my big takeaway here is. Thank you so much.
You're going to learn, right? Maybe that's something too, to tell yourself, you're going to learn it. And for me, I learn really well by doing, or by like being able to visualize it. So even like videos are really good for me, where sometimes just reading things aren't. I am starting to get into like when I'm doing malware analysis. And I kind of even do like what I'm suggesting is I take a piece of malware, I look at the write-ups and I grab write-ups from everywhere. I grab write-ups from Flare. I grab write-ups from, whoever. Like there are a few people on Twitter that like, they have excellent research. And so I'll grab their stuff and and like, big companies as well, like they always have, great teams that are able to dedicate a lot of time to creating a really nice write-up with nice screenshots. I need screenshots. I need to see what it looks like in the computer. I don't just want kind of that, like there's sometimes like they'll tell you what's happening and what processes are being created or injected or whatever. But like, I need to, when I can see screenshots of what they were looking at on their malware analysis machine, that gives me more in my head. So I do that a lot. I start going through and seeing what pops up. And so, yeah.
I guess one key thing though that I just hadn't thought of right now is one thing that's really helping me with tools is I'm not in a place where I can just look at a wall of text. I need a tool with a good GUI that I can go and separate things. Hey, tabs are my friends, so I don't have to see everything.
Yes.
Like these are the TTPs that I'm trying to look for. These are the strings instead of just this wall of text. And you know what? That's okay. I don't have to be the command line hero all the time.
Right. And like you said, though, because like that's me, I was always a GUI person. And now I'm like, I'll go Google stuff, how to do stuff on the command line just because I don't want to go in the GUI. And it's so funny because like 3 years ago, even 2 years ago, like before I got into Mandiant, I didn't do a ton on the command line and it terrified me. And now like if I have to go into like Windows command line, I'm like, I'd rather do Windows command line than a GUI or PowerShell. But like to just be in a Unix-based environment, I'm pretty sure the Unix-based environments are cloaked in warm, fuzzy, like, robes because I'm happy. I like being on the command line now. And that is something I never, ever, ever thought. And it's just, that's been a progression of just as you do things and you realize that I like using TCP dump to get network traffic. I don't use Wireshark. I don't use that feature in Wireshark, and I never really have, except for like with a couple of classes. I like TCP dump. I think it's easy for me to understand, and I can type in the things that I need. I like Nmap. When I first started learning some of the red teaming tools, and Callie has, what is it, Zenmap? Is that what it's called? Zenmap, something. Zenmap. Anyways, it's a GUI version of Nmap. And so I just got a pop-up on my screen that says, are you playing music? So I liked the GUI for the Zenmap. I think it's Zenmap. But now I actually like using Nmap, and I like just seeing it on the command line. So like, that's something like, don't like, if you're like, you'll get there. You're going to learn all the things at some point. It's more of just like trying to block out, especially if you're like me and you're like all over the place and you want to know all of the things. It can be difficult to kind of go, all right, that's a rabbit hole I can't go down right now. Maybe jot it down and I can go down it another day, but I cannot go down it right now.
Wow, we've discovered there's going to be a part 2 at some point, and maybe 3 and 4, because there's just so much here. But I know, people can't stay watching these stuff all day. So,
right.
Final parting words to, up and coming or, just growing DFIR, deeper folk out there.
A lot of people are worried. I get a lot of questions about people coming that are new, and people are always worried about certs and degrees and all this kind of stuff. And I think that we are in this amazing place in InfoSec where people don't care where you got the knowledge, where you got the skills, where you learned it, how all of that came to be. They just care that you can do it, right? If you're trying to get a pen testing job, then go to HackTheBox, go to TryHackMe, and just do it. So you can gain those skills in a free way. The only thing that is going to hold you back is your motivation and your desire to push forward. And so if you think like, oh, I have to get into a school, or, oh, I need to get into a boot camp, or, oh, no, you don't. The majority of the places right now, Mandiant, I can tell you absolutely, they don't really care about certs. If if that works best for you to learn that that knowledge, and you need that kind of like test at the end, then by all means do it. But understand that you don't have to. You can get the skills to go into the next position that you want to do just like you are, by figuring out, okay, what do I want to do? How do I want to do it? Let me find some tools that I can start working, and just start doing it at home in your spare time. And learning. You don't need to worry like, oh, I can't do it for 2 years because I don't have the skills and I need to get a degree in CS, or I need to learn this, or no, you just can learn the stuff here. Get a Flare VM and start opening malware and seeing what it does. Like all of those things can be done, and you can learn that, and you can move into these other positions without having to worry that I don't have a cert. I'm not, CISSP. Like, you don't need all of that. You just need the knowledge, and you can get that for free. So I encourage people that if you think that you want to break into a new area, start messing around with it on your own. Determine if that's does that excite you? Do you like when ransomware locks up your VM? I do. So like, I knew that I was going to want to continue to go that direction, because when I got into my position, I didn't know where I would want to go eventually. And that could change. Who knows? I'm very fluid with it. Like, I pay my bills and I'm happy, and I work from home and I have a wonderful environment. So like, whatever door opens for me, I check it out, but I don't worry that like, okay, I have to get to here. I just learn, and I try to stay open-minded to things that pop up for me. And I think that's important for people in InfoSec, because InfoSec, I guarantee there's not a person in InfoSec that understands all the portions in InfoSec, right? Like, there's so many career paths. There's a visual out there on the internet of like all the paths to InfoSec, and it looks like a train map. Like, it's just so many places. And so keep an open mind. You may find that while you want to get into, DFIR, you may find later on that you're like, I really like when ransomware locks my stuff up. You may find you really like looking at PCAPs, and you'd rather do just incident response and not do the forensic, focus on forensics. Keep an open mind, because there's so much out there, and it's so cool, and there's so much to do that, like, you may find that you just absolutely fall into your passion, and you had no idea that even existed.
With that motivation, yeah, I guess keep an eye out for more of this, because I am so excited, and I have a feeling that there is a lot more people to talk about, a lot more things to learn, and I'm guessing a lot more collaboration between us too.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, everyone. You guys have a great night, morning, depending on where you are.
Thanks so much.
Bye.